There's a man who walked the grasslands of Central Asia roughly 4,000 years ago. Right now, somewhere between 16 and 19 million people alive on this planet carry an unbroken line of his fatherhood. Not his name, not his face. Just one thread of DNA, passed son to son, for 200 generations. Meanwhile, in that same world, at that same time, huge numbers of other men left no line at all. None. Their bloodlines simply stopped. That gap is strange. It's almost unfair. And the reason it exists is going to break apart everything you think you know about how our ancestors actually paired off. Because here's the question worth asking. Did early humans really settle down with just one partner, the way we picture it today? Or is that picture something we built much later and quietly projected backward onto people who never agreed to it? Stay with this one. The answer sits in a strange middle ground that most people never get shown. And once you see it, you won't think about love, loyalty, or commitment the same way again. If that gap between the man with millions of descendants and the men with none already has you a little stunned, that's the right reaction. Hit like, subscribe if you're new here, and drop a comment telling me which side of that gap surprises you more, the winners or the ones erased completely. Let's start with the body. Bodies don't lie the way stories do. Animals that compete hard for mates end up shaped by that competition. The competition leaves marks, literal, physical marks, carried for generations. Take gorillas. A male silverback can weigh almost twice what a female does. That size gap isn't random. It's the fingerprint of constant fighting for exclusive access to several mates at once. Now compare that to species that pair off one-to-one. In those animals, males and females come out roughly the same size. There's no fistfight to win, so there's no reason for size to spiral upward. So where do humans land? Men average somewhere around 15 to 20% heavier than women, and a few inches taller. That's a real gap, but a modest one. It's too big for a species that mates strictly one-to-one. It's nowhere near big enough for a species like gorillas. Our bodies are telling us we sit somewhere in the messy middle. There's a second clue, and it's a strange one. Testicle size relative to body weight. When females mate with more than one male in a short window, sperm from different men ends up racing inside the same body. That race rewards males who can produce more, so testicle size grows over evolutionary time. Chimpanzees live this way constantly. Their anatomy shows it. Enormous testicles relative to their size, built for non-stop internal competition. Gorillas, where one dominant male has exclusive access, show the opposite. Small testicles. No race to win, so no reason to build for one. Humans, once again, land right in the gap between the two. Bigger than the exclusive gorilla model. Smaller than the free-for-all chimpanzee model. Two completely separate pieces of anatomy. And they both point to the same conclusion. Our ancestors weren't strictly faithful in the modern sense, and they weren't running wild either. They were doing something more complicated than either label allows. So what did that complicated thing actually look like once real societies started forming? This is where it gets genuinely surprising, because the cultural record almost seems to contradict the biology. Until you look closer. Anthropologists have cataloged hundreds of human societies across history. Somewhere around 80% of them officially allow a man to take more than one wife. On paper, that looks like overwhelming proof that multiple partners is simply our default setting. But allowed and actually happening are two very different things. Mixing them up creates a completely false picture. In nearly every one of those societies, most marriages were still one man and one woman. Taking a second or third wife required wealth, land, livestock, status, resources that only a small slice of men ever had. The average man, in the average era, throughout almost all of human history, had exactly one partner at a time. Permission to do otherwise just wasn't something most people could afford to use. There's another layer, too. Societies that lean hardest into multiple wives tend to be wealthy, settled, property-owning societies. Farmers, herders, people with surplus to hoard. The hunting and gathering bands that represent the vast majority of our evolutionary past show far less of this pattern. Because nobody could stockpile enough to support extra households, and quietly, in around 15 to 20% of documented cultures, one-partner pairing wasn't just common. It was the enforced rule, the cultural law. That's not a fluke. That number is way too large to be some modern accident. It shows up again and again, independently, in unrelated parts of the world. So why would separate, unconnected cultures keep landing on the same rule? What problem does it actually solve? Picture a society where a handful of powerful men hoard most of the available partners. Every other man is left with nothing. No partner, no stake in the future, no reason to play by the rules. A man with nothing to lose is dangerous. He fights more. He gambles more. He has zero investment in keeping the peace because the peace was never built for him. Enforced one-partner pairing breaks that pattern. It spreads access more evenly. Suddenly, the man at the bottom has something to protect. A partner, a household, a reason to cooperate instead of burn it all down. Societies that did this saw less male violence, and more fathers actually sticking around to raise their kids. Both of those things make a community stronger, calmer, and far more able to build something that lasts generations. There's an even more personal layer underneath all of this. A man who knows, with real confidence, that his partner's children are his own children, invests more in them. That confidence had to be protected somehow, and exclusivity, enforced socially, was the tool that protected it. None of this makes one-partner pairing natural in some pure, automatic sense. It's closer to an invention, a rule built by groups of people solving a real, recurring problem. But invented doesn't mean fake, and it doesn't mean fragile. Plenty of our best tools were invented out of necessity. Now here's where the genetics get almost eerie. They show us what was actually happening underneath all that theory. That man from the step we opened with? His millions of living descendants aren't a fluke of math. Genetic researchers trace these massive, lopsided family trees, and they find the same pattern again and again in agricultural and herding societies. A small number of men fathering enormous numbers of children, while huge numbers of other men father none at all. Once people started owning land, herds, and property that could be handed down, the imbalance got worse, not better. Wealth meant more partners. More partners meant more children. The cycle fed itself. Hunting and gathering communities tell a noticeably different genetic story. Less hoarding, less inequality, more men actually getting the chance to father children at all. When nobody can stockpile much more than their neighbor, nobody can buy their way into an unfair share of partners either. But underneath every version of this story, wealthy or poor, ancient or recent, one thing never disappears. The pair bond. Two specific people, choosing each other, building a life and raising children together. That bond isn't just a social habit, it's wired in, chemically. The same brain systems responsible for trust and attachment between a parent and child also fire when two adults bond romantically. That circuitry didn't appear by accident. Pairs who stuck together raised more children who survived, generation after generation, until the wiring became permanent. And yet, here's the part that complicates the tidy version. That bond, almost everywhere it's been studied, wasn't always airtight. Relationships outside the primary pair showed up again and again, across cultures, across centuries. Quietly tolerated more often than openly punished. Not chaos, not randomness. These were usually ongoing, semi-recognized connections within a community that knew exactly who was involved. Not secret, anonymous encounters, but something closer to an open secret with its own unwritten rules. The honest picture isn't everyone was faithful or nobody was. It's messier than both. And that messiness is the actual truth, even when it's the least satisfying answer. Part of that messiness comes down to people simply being different from each other. In any group of early humans, some individuals leaned hard toward one steady partner for life. Others leaned toward variety, toward multiple connections, toward something looser. That spread of personalities wasn't a glitch in the system. It was the system. Nature doesn't produce one identical blueprint for every person. It produces a range. And that range is exactly why human relationships still look so different from each other today. One of the clearest windows into all of this is something almost everyone has felt firsthand: jealousy. Jealousy shows up in absolutely every culture ever studied, with the same basic shape everywhere. That kind of universal pattern doesn't appear by accident. It appears because it solved a real problem, repeatedly, for a very long time. And the shape of that jealousy is oddly specific. Men, on average, react most intensely to physical betrayal, the fear that a partner has been intimate with someone else. Women, on average, react most intensely to emotional betrayal, the fear that a partner's heart, attention, and resources have quietly drifted toward someone else. That split makes sense once you think about what each kind of betrayal historically risked. For a man, it risked raising a child who wasn't his without knowing it. For a woman, it risked losing a partner's support and protection to a rival entirely. Different risks, different alarms. But both alarms are doing the exact same job: protecting the bond. Women weren't passive in any of this either. Far from it. In small, tightly knit communities, women actively chose, judged, rejected, and pursued based on what actually mattered to them. Reliability, kindness, the willingness to share, real evidence of follow-through over time. And in a small community, you can't fake that for long. Everyone sees everyone, constantly. A man's true character was visible to the whole group, which meant women's choices were shaped by genuinely solid information, arguably better information than most people have about potential partners today. One more piece ties this whole picture together: marriage. In some recognizable form, it exists in literally every human culture ever documented. Different rules, different ceremonies, wildly different details. But the underlying idea, a publicly recognized bond with real obligations attached, shows up everywhere, every time. Cultures don't build formal structures around things that don't matter. They build them around things that are both important and fragile. Important enough to need protecting, fragile enough to need rules holding it together. So pull every thread together, and here's where it actually lands. Our ancestors mostly paired off, one partner at a time. And that pairing carried real weight, emotional, practical, lasting. That part is solid, and it shows up everywhere humans have ever been studied. But that pairing was rarely a perfectly sealed box. It bent, it flexed. It allowed for exceptions that everyone quietly understood, even when nobody said them out loud. The most accurate way to describe it isn't naturally faithful, and it isn't naturally wild. It's something far more human than either. A strong default toward one partner, with real, documented room to bend. That's not the clean, comforting answer some people want. It doesn't hand a trophy to strict tradition, and it doesn't hand one to total freedom either. It just hands you the truth. And the truth has never been simple. Not back then. And honestly, not now either. The bond is real. The flexibility is real too. And the exact shape your own relationships take has always been something negotiated between biology, culture, and the people standing right in front of you. Which, if you've ever loved anyone, probably doesn't surprise you at all. If this changed how you think about love, loyalty, or where our instincts actually come from, that's exactly why this channel exists. So hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me below. Does this complicated middle ground feel more honest to you than the simple version we usually get told? Thanks for watching this one all the way through. It means a lot, and I'll see you in the next one.